Today is the last day of Adobe 2025, and I've got good news and bad news for you. What do you want first? The good news? The good news is that Adobe released a lot of really cool stuff. A lot of new products, a lot of new features. The bad news is you can't use any of it, and you probably don't want to. Here's why. So this week was Adobe's big annual conference. Once a year, they announce all of the biggest new products, tools, and features that they've been working on for their softwares. But this week wasn't random. Tomorrow, and probably by the time you're watching this, Affinity will have announced their new update, their new big version 3. This is big news, and they're Adobe's closest competitor. At the same time, Canva is having a keynote, and Figma already had their conference this week too. So with Adobe's stock plummeting, their terrible headlines, and creatives constantly searching for a cheaper alternative, they really needed to step up to their game and make sure that they announce some new tools that would make people want to stick with them. So before I get to the bad news of what was announced at Adobe MAX, let's talk about the good news and the cool products and features that they did announce. Okay, so at the top of my list is Adobe's AI Assistant. This is really interesting. It's in Photoshop and it's from Firefly, and essentially it lets you control Photoshop with just prompts. So instead of having to mess with tools and things, you can just type out what you need to change. And imagine you need to rename all of your layers. Well, you can just ask the prompt, ask the little ChatGPT in Photoshop, hey, can you name all my layers? If you need to brighten the image, ask it to brighten the image. Instead of you dealing with all the little individual tools, you can just ask AI to do it for you, and you can sit back and watch it work in the Photoshop software. I think this is actually really cool because instead of them reinventing the wheel here, they just brought AI into Photoshop, and it made it an easier process to use the application while you can still use the Pro application. They didn't like delete Photoshop and create Photoshop GPT. They just added a AI assistant into it. I think that was very smart. The only problem with this is in their demo, this was in Photoshop Web, which I didn't even know Photoshop Web was a thing. And then of course the other half of this was in Adobe Firefly, which who uses Firefly or Adobe Express? My point is, no one wants these web apps. They just want to be able to use this in the Photoshop desktop app, and hopefully that gets implemented. The next really cool updates were in Lightroom. So they added this reflection remover tool, which is really great because I'm definitely the type of guy that if there's a bad reflection, I'm just throwing that photo away. But this new tool was really cool because it allows you to actually control how much reflection you want. So you could completely remove the reflection, or you could completely remove the person and keep the reflection, so you can get a very natural look. The next Lightroom feature they added was this AI dust remover. So in case you have a really dirty camera sensor, you can now just use this one-click button and it'll remove all of the spots from your image and generate in generative fill every little spot. So I thought that was pretty neat. That's a little time saver. Lastly, in Lightroom, they announced assisted culling, which is fancy terms for AI filter and sort through your photos. So for example, last weekend I shot an event where I literally took 1,000 photos, and this assisting culling feature will be very helpful for me to sort through, get rid of all the photos that are out of focus, and just pick the ones that I want. So it kind of filters them out based off what the AI thinks, and then you can go back, of course, and look at the rejects and make sure it's not rejecting any of your favorite shots. The next big game-changing announcement was Project Clean Take. So quick disclaimer, anything with project in front of the name is going to be beta tool, like pre-beta, beta. So Project Clean Take is all about adjusting narration in video and background music and sounds. So essentially what it allows you to do, a couple of features that they demoed, you can change the inflection of your voice. So let's say I record this segment and I say, I'm recording this segment. You can actually change that to be confident, and you could say, I'm recording this segment. And it will AI adjust your voice so you can change how you pronunciate things after the fact, which is wild. You'll be able to change the words you say and the emotion of which you say them. So literally, if you mess up a word, maybe I didn't want to say literally just a second ago, I can go into the transcribe feature, delete that word, and then it will AI adjust everything. Another really cool feature is that it lets you break down audio into stems, which is insane. I've been wanting something to do this since I was a kid. So you can take your audio file and it will break it up into your voice, the background noise, the music, maybe an isolated incident where somebody dropped something on the floor, and you can look at all of the separate sound layers and then adjust them how you'd like. I think this one is really crazy. This has a lot of potential. Next was Project Light Touch, which basically allows you to adjust lighting and environments. It seems very cool. It seems kind of similar to what we can do with neural filters right now, where you can adjust portrait lighting, where shadows and stuff are coming from. But this is like a 2.0 version of that, where you can adjust like lamps and the strength of light, and it adjusts the reflections on the walls and all that stuff. Very AI powered, you can tell. My next favorite feature is Project Trace Erase, which is essentially Generative Fill 2.0. So I'm excited about that. I'm a huge Generative Fill fan. I use it all the time. This is just Generative Fill on crack. It just like amplifies what we already have with Generative Fill, where it does shadows and reflections and all that stuff better. Next up is Project Frame Forward, which is essentially Generative Fill in Premiere, which we already have Generative Fill in Premiere, and I've covered that in my channel and shown that beta, but this is showing it on another level of where you can really remove stuff, add stuff. You can even bring your video into Photoshop, color grade it, and change and mess with the composition in Photoshop, then bring it back and generate the rest of the video. Next was Project Turnstile, which is kind of like transform, perspective, distort, like all of that 2.0 and on crack. It lets you take whatever object you drop into your artboard and lets you 3D-ify it. So you can then turn it into a 3D object, rotate it, transform it, change how you want it to display, and then apply the effect and it solidifies back into shape on the canvas. And then just a couple more quick features that I thought were really cool. So Topaz integration in Photoshop. If you don't know what Topaz is, it is like the best AI upscaler. So let's say you have a really blurry or pixelated image, low resolution image, or even a decent resolution image that you want higher. Topaz takes your photo and it makes it higher resolution, and it's very good at what it does. It's very cool, and I'm so glad to see that's now integrated directly into Photoshop instead of a separate app. They also improved the Harmonize feature, which again, this is another 2.0. Like, we already had the Harmonize feature, but it didn't work that well on skin and stuff like that. So this new Harmonize feature has a little AI magic supposedly, and it's supposed to work better. And finally, they released two other apps that I think are interesting and worth noting as the good. So one of them is GenStudio, which is a competitor to Figma Buzz. Essentially what it lets you do is create one graphic that's a template, and then you can bulk create 1,000 other graphics. This is not really for the average Joe. This is more geared towards corporations. So let's say you like red shoes and I like blue shoes. Well, shoe company can come and they can advertise you and I the same shoe, and they can make 1,000 different graphics in all different colors of this shoe, and then social media advertise it to all different people who like all different colors of shoes. So it's one graphic, one template, but they can redesign it for a bunch of different types of people and a bunch of different content and words and images. Google Labs also released a competitor to this, so now you have GenStudio, Figma Buzz, and Google Labs all have their own version of this. And then lastly, there was Project Graph, which I think this is a fascinating concept. It's essentially editing in Photoshop and 3D modeling and all this stuff through nodes. So if you're familiar with DaVinci nodes, you would kind of know what I'm talking about. But it's just a linear timeline style of creating. It's very unique. It's very niche. I think the people who do this stuff, who use apps like Comfy UI, which is already an existing app that kind of does this, I think they'll find this more interesting. But to the average Joe, they're probably not going to use this one. So that was the good. And there's a lot to be excited about here. There's a lot of potential. But the problem is when you really dig a little bit deeper into this, and you just peel off one of those layers, they really released almost nothing. Let me explain. The Photoshop AI Assistant, the one at the top of my list, was for Photoshop Web. And I hope that it's released to Photoshop Desktop, but doesn't seem like it right now. Same thing with the Adobe Firefly Express Assistant. It looked like some really cool stuff there, but doesn't look like that's actually integrated to the Photoshop Desktop app either. Project Graph and GenStudio also seem like really cool products, but they're for really specific people, and I know it's not for me, and it's probably not for you. And Harmonize is nice, but we already kind of had that. In fact, we already had a lot of these announcements. The podcast enhancer, for example, I've been using that in my videos for like a year now, but they announced it yesterday. I know it's been in beta, but it's not really a new feature if I've been using it this whole time. Same thing with generate sound effects. And the same thing with Illustrator Turntable, which actually was an announcement last year at Adobe MAX, and now it was an announcement again this year because it's out of beta. And like I mentioned, anything with project in front of the name is not actually a real feature or even a beta feature. It is far from being announced. So all of that cool stuff like Project Clean Take or Project Frame Forward, those are all research projects that aren't actually going to be implemented yet. And I hope that they are implemented in Photoshop and Premiere soon, but there's no word on how or when that will happen. They also announced a couple of other projects that didn't make my list to the good cut. They were actually really bad. For example, this Adobe Motion project, it's just a Canva like animation copycat, and it didn't even work well in the demo. They had this thing called Project SceneIt, which is just generating a 3D model from an image, which sounds cool, but at the end of the day, it's really just AI slop. And speaking of AI slop, they had Project Soundstager, which was generating a bunch of AI sound effects, which is a cool concept. It didn't really work well in the demo. It didn't sound good, but they were using like an AI octopus for the whole demo. It literally looked like AI social media Facebook slop. Another one was Project New Depths, which is like 3D photogrammetry, which I actually use 3D photogrammetry. That's actually something I do in my creative business, and I don't see any reason why Adobe needed to make this tool. So my point is, once you get rid of all the projects, which aren't real tools, and then the random apps like Firefly boards and Premiere Mobile with the YouTube connection, like all of the stuff that people don't actually use or can't use, then what that leaves us with Adobe MAX 2025, the things we're walking away with that are actually good are these Lightroom features and like the Topaz integration in Photoshop and a couple of other random quality of life. They kept calling them quality of life features, which in my opinion, a quality of life feature is more of a update that we should be getting on like a weekly or monthly basis, not at Adobe's yearly keynote. And again, this is important context that Affinity is coming out tomorrow with an announcement, which hopefully isn't a subscription, but my point is that a subscription is because you're getting these updates. So that's $700 a year that you're paying Adobe for so that you can have updates. It's all this whole keynote was just clouded by stuff you don't want, stuff that's already existed, and stuff that you can't even use. Overall, this event was just kind of embarrassing, and it showed just how disconnected Adobe is from their users. Like, even all of the examples they gave with these announcements were so far from what anybody would use Adobe products for. Let me give you an example. They were showing how you can create custom AI models with Firefly. The way they showcase this product is by showing an artist who makes digital art, and they dumped their artwork into Adobe Firefly so the AI can scan and eat up their art, and then it generated new art based off of their original style. That is like everybody's greatest fear. Nobody wants that. That is that's the exact opposite of what I can't even fathom how that made people feel watching that. People don't want Adobe to be able to train off their artwork and then spit out new artwork in their style. That is what nobody wants. Another example they showed was someone who was trying to make an Instagram post for their dog's birthday. Now, instead of being creative and making this, they connected their Instagram account to their Adobe AI Assistant. It analyzed their posts, told them what post performed well, then it auto-created an AI graphic of their dog. And I was just watching this and I was like, this idea makes sense for corporations, but nobody wants to get that creative freedom taken away from them where they're just AI slop posting their dog's birthday card on Instagram, all done through AI and robots. Nobody wants that either. And again, them showing the AI octopus social media vlog thing when they were trying to showcase the sound effects beta. Generating sound effects is cool. Adobe users probably want that. But they should have shown that in real case scenarios of maybe you're making a short film and you need sound effects. Not like you're making an AI octopus Facebook video. None of the presenters even felt like they had a clue what it was like to be a creative in this year, and the entertainment co-host she didn't have a clue what planet she was on, and she did not even know what Photoshop was, and she admitted several times that she was falling asleep through the presentation and tried to save herself after the fact. Now look, I don't want to just be all talk. So I've come up with 7 features. In the last half hour, I wrote up 7 features that I think Adobe should have announced and implemented. Not just announced, but actually created and presented on stage as this works and you get to access this with your $700 a year subscription. So these are my 7 features that I think Adobe should be actually innovating and creating. So the first thing that I came up with is I was live streaming my reaction to this presentation, and on YouTube you get to actually live stream in horizontal and vertical at the same time. And that's pretty neat. I thought that was really cool. And that idea made me think, why can't you edit a horizontal and a vertical video side by side? I have to do that for my clients all the time. So this first concept is just in Premiere, horizontal and vertical editing at the same time. That way you don't have to make 2 different sequences and then edit 2 completely different timelines and videos just to deliver a vertical format of the same video. My next idea is to generate a soundtrack with music score. They announced this generate soundtrack feature, but it just made AI music just based off the first frame of the video. And I saw that and I was like, this is so close to being really helpful. If I had a YouTube video like this one that I want to have a soundtrack to, and it could generate a score, a composition, not just an AI song, but something that follows the rhythm of I get really excited and the song gets excited, and then there's a lull in the video and the song calms down, and something that actually enhanced the video. That's an amazing concept, and a $150 billion company like Adobe should be able to accomplish that. I also think it would be nice just to have some helpful AI tools that I get with Envato Elements. So in Envato, there's AI voice narration. So you can just dump in an AI voice narrator into your video. Why isn't that just in Premiere? There's also AI B-roll. Why isn't that in Premiere? Premiere could literally look at the footage from before and after in the timeline and just create B-roll that perfectly fits in your video. Moving on to Illustrator, I thought it would be a cool idea if Illustrator had a product mockup studio. I know that Illustrator has a basic mockup tool that they announced, but it's hardly usable. It'd be really cool when you finish the design to actually be able to open it up in a window in Illustrator and create some really great mockups. This is something that everybody does, and they all have to go to different applications to make it happen. why isn't it just embedded in the Adobe apps? Another basic feature, maybe you could call this one a quality of life feature, is like logo variations. You know, you make a logo, you have to make it in black, white, color with white text, color with black text, vice versa. You have to make a social share image, you have to make an Instagram circular logo. Like that could all just be one button click when you finalize your logo. Exporting doesn't have to be hard. And then lastly, I thought maybe for Lightroom, you know, photographers often shoot a photo session with clients and then they have to upload them to another website so that the clients can purchase the photos and download them and purchase them as prints. And it's just another unnecessary step. Wouldn't that make sense if that was integrated in Lightroom? So again, like the export settings, when you're done with a photo session, you could just send that to the client and they get that whole Lightroom photo experience, like instead of having to do all this with a separate app. But like that is just free. That's like a free idea that exists. They can just take that and they can just make it happen. They already have Adobe portfolio sites. They can just smush that together and make this idea. And those are just a handful of ideas that I came up with literally in like 5 minutes before this live stream happened. If I can come up with those ideas in that short amount of time, I feel like Adobe should be able to come up with better ideas for their own products and actually implement them and deliver them once a year instead of just kind of fake delivering all of these ideas. I really want to see Adobe have more innovation and actually try to stay on top when they know they're just falling behind. But more importantly, what I want to see is whatever comes out of Affinity tomorrow. Like I said, by the time you're watching this, that might have already been announced, and I'm going to make a video on it. So I'm going to post that video right here when it's made. And if it's not made, make sure you subscribe and you hit the bell so that when I do make that video, you'll be the first to hear about it. So check that out. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Adobe MAX 2025. Am I being too hard on them, or do you want to see a little bit more from the $150 billion giant?